The Chicago skyline stretched across the horizon, golden lights spilling over glass skyscrapers as the city stirred awake. From his corner office on the 26th floor of Sterling Financial Group, Michael Carter took a slow sip of his black coffee, letting its bitterness settle on his tongue. He liked his coffee like he liked his life, strong, disciplined, and without unnecessary sweetness. His day was planned to the last detail. Early morning reports, back-to-back client calls, and a dinner reservation with Laura, his wife of 6 years. Their relationship wasn't a passionate whirlwind, nor was it riddled with problems. It was stable, routine, exactly the way he preferred things. He glanced at his desk, where a neatly stacked pile of files sat waiting for review. Everything in his life had its place, its order. He and Laura weren't the kind of couple who bickered or had dramatic fights. Their marriage was efficient, predictable, or so he thought. That evening, he arrived home later than usual. The apartment smelled of lavender and vanilla, Laura's signature scent. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, her blonde hair tied up in a casual bun. "You're home late," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "Long day," he replied, loosening his tie as he walked toward the counter. Laura gave him a small smile before checking her phone, quickly locking the screen. It was a tiny movement, barely noticeable, but Michael caught it. He had always been good at reading people, clients, colleagues, investors. But somehow, he had never thought to analyze his own wife. He brushed the thought aside, blaming it on exhaustion. "I need to check an email," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. The screen remained dark. Dead battery. He sighed. Important contracts needed his approval. "Can I borrow your phone for a second?" he asked casually. Laura hesitated. "Just for a second." Then, with a forced smile, she handed it over. "Sure, just don't go snooping through my texts," she joked. Michael didn't laugh. He opened the email app, quickly locating the contract he needed. He was about to hand the phone back when his thumb accidentally brushed across the home screen. The motion revealed an unfamiliar folder labeled Private Memories. His breath slowed. His heartbeat didn't. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. And yet, his instincts, the ones that had never failed him in his career, told him to look. He tapped on the folder. The screen filled with hundreds of photos. At first, they were harmless. Laura at a restaurant, Laura at the beach, Laura in a luxury suite. Then, his stomach dropped. Because she wasn't alone. There was a man in almost every photo. Tall, dark-haired, handsome in an effortless way. Someone Michael had never seen before. The timestamps on the images weren't from years ago. They were recent. Every picture was from Laura's birthday trips. Trips, she had told Michael, were just family vacations with her parents. His grip tightened around the phone as he scrolled faster. There were photos of her holding champagne glasses with the man, walking along the shore, laughing in candlelit restaurants. Michael's breath came out in sharp bursts. It wasn't just an affair. It was a double life. Every year, on her birthday, Laura had slipped away with her parents and this man. Every year, she had smiled in his face, accepted his birthday gifts, kissed him goodnight, all while celebrating her real birthday with someone else. His fingers shook. He wanted to stop looking, but he couldn't. The betrayal felt like a blade slowly sinking between his ribs, twisting with each new photo. He backed out of the folder, his mind racing. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew the truth. The timestamps didn't lie. Neither did the pictures. Michael turned to Laura, who was still sipping her wine, completely unaware that the foundation of their marriage had just crumbled beneath him. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe. Now wasn't the time to explode. Now was the time to think, to plan. Because if there was one thing Michael Carter never did, it was lose. I stared at the screen of Laura's phone, my grip tightening as if holding it any looser would make the truth slip away. The images, the evidence of her betrayal, were burned into my mind. I could hear the distant hum of the city outside, the occasional honk of a car below, the ticking of the wall clock. Everything sounded normal, like any other night. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. I looked up at my wife. She was sitting on the couch now, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that her world had just changed. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she casually sipped her wine, it was all a lie. My first instinct was to confront her, to throw the phone across the room and demand answers. But I didn't. Because I wasn't some fool acting on impulse. No, that wasn't me. I had built a career on strategy, on reading people, knowing when to make my move and when to hold my cards close. And right now, I needed to hold my cards close. I placed her phone back on the counter, exactly where it had been, and forced my face into a neutral expression. "What's for dinner?" I asked. Laura glanced at me, her face relaxed. She had no idea that I had just uncovered her secret life. "I was thinking of ordering Thai." "You in the mood for that?" she said, tilting her head slightly. I nodded. It didn't matter what I ate tonight. It didn't matter what she said, how she acted, how normal she tried to make this evening. Because normal was dead. I walked into our bedroom, my mind running at 100 miles per hour. My pulse pounded in my ears, but my face remained calm. This wasn't the time to break. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a slow breath. Think, plan, execute. Those 3 words had gotten me through every challenge in my life. Laura had been careful. That folder on her phone wasn't labeled with some obvious name. It was tucked away, hidden under something so ordinary that she probably never expected me to find it. Which meant she was confident. Which meant she had no idea I knew. And that was my greatest advantage. I pulled out my own phone, checking the messages between us. She had never slipped. Every text, every call, every "I love you" had been so perfectly scripted that if I hadn't seen those pictures, I never would have suspected a thing. It wasn't just an affair. It was a performance. I scrolled through my emails, my calendar, every moment we had spent apart. I looked at every trip she had taken, every event she had attended without me. And slowly, the pattern started to emerge. The birthday trips. Every year, she had gone away for a weekend, saying it was with her parents. And every year, I had trusted her, never questioned her. Until now, I needed to know more. I needed to know who the man in the pictures was. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep the deception ran. And most of all, I needed to know how I was going to destroy the life she had built behind my back. I stood up, walking to my closet. My hands were steady as I pulled out a small black notebook, the one I used for important details, reminders, notes I didn't keep on my phone. I flipped it open and started writing down everything I had discovered so far. Photos dated back at least 3 years. Trips always happened around her birthday. Same man in multiple locations. No signs of guilt or hesitation in her behavior. Parents possibly covering for her. I tapped the pen against the paper, my mind sharpening. Who was this man? I pulled up her Instagram, scrolled through her posts. There were no signs of him anywhere, but that didn't mean he wasn't there. He was just hidden. That meant one thing. He was careful too. I needed more. More than just pictures. I needed to track her movements. I put the notebook back in my drawer and took out my laptop. Within minutes, I had accessed our shared banking account. Laura had her own credit cards, but we had a joint account for shared expenses. And there it was, hotel bookings, restaurant payments, flights. She had been using our money to fund her affair. That was the first mistake she had made. Because now I had evidence. Now I had control. The front door opened, and Laura walked into the bedroom, holding a bag of takeout. "Food's here," she said, smiling as if nothing had changed. I forced a smile back, nodding as I closed my laptop. "Great," I said, standing up. I walked past her, brushing my fingers against her shoulder in what looked like an affectionate gesture. But inside, I was already planning her downfall. Because now that I knew the truth, one thing was certain. I wasn't going to be the fool in this story. She thought she was playing a game. She had no idea who she was playing against. And I was about to make sure she lost everything. The next morning, I woke up before Laura. She was curled up on her side, breathing steadily, completely unaware that I had spent most of the night digging into her lies. I turned off my alarm before it could ring, careful not to wake her. Today wasn't the day to confront her. Today was the day to learn more. I moved quietly, dressing in my usual suit and tie, my mind replaying everything I had discovered. The photos, the trips, the hidden expenses. But there were still gaps. I needed a name. I walked into the kitchen, the scent of coffee filling the air. As I poured a cup, my phone vibrated on the counter. A new email. From our bank. I clicked on it and scanned the details. There it was, a recent transaction from our joint account. A charge at the Langford Hotel, a luxury spot just outside the city. That wasn't a place Laura and I had ever been to together. I took a slow sip of my coffee, keeping my hands steady. She had been there 2 weeks ago, and she had used our money. I checked the time. 7 a.m. Laura wouldn't be awake for at least another hour. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment. The Langford Hotel was sleek, modern, expensive. The kind of place where people came to hide secrets behind polished glass doors and hushed conversations. I walked through the grand entrance, scanning the lobby. The receptionist smiled politely as I approached. "Good morning, sir. How can I assist you?" I pulled out my wallet, flashing my business card instead of cash. A calculated move. People in places like this respected wealth and power more than money. "I believe my wife stayed here recently. Laura Carter. She made a reservation about 2 weeks ago," I said, keeping my voice even, controlled. The woman hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Privacy policies. She wasn't supposed to share guest details. I just need confirmation," I added smoothly. "She left something valuable behind, and I'd rather avoid making this a bigger issue." A pause. Then, she nodded, typing quickly. A moment later, she looked up. "Yes, Mr. Carter. Your wife had a 3-day stay in our executive suite. She checked in on the 3rd and checked out on the 6th. 3 days. 3 days where she told me she was visiting her parents. Did she check in alone?" I asked. Another pause. Then, the woman glanced around before lowering her voice. "No. The reservation was under 2 names, Laura Carter and Benjamin Reed." Benjamin Reed. I rolled the name over in my mind. It meant nothing to me yet. "Thank you," I said, sliding my card back into my wallet. I turned and walked out of the hotel, my mind spinning. Benjamin Reed. The first real piece of information. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. Nothing immediately useful. Too many results. I needed something better. A direct link to Laura. As I got into my car, I checked her Instagram followers. Scrolled through her Facebook friends. The name wasn't there. Clever. But not clever enough. I switched to LinkedIn. And that's when I found him. Benjamin Reed, investment consultant at Ashwood Capital. The same industry as me. Same city. And his profile picture? The same man from the photos. Everything inside me went cold. Not just an affair. Not just a fling. Laura had been cheating on me with a man who worked in the same industry. Did he know who I was? Did he laugh behind my back, knowing he was sleeping with my wife while I sat in boardrooms making million-dollar deals? I gripped the steering wheel, my jaw tightening. I could already see the pattern. Laura wasn't just sneaking around. She was careful, calculated. She had kept this man hidden, wiped any traces of him from her public life. But she had made one mistake. She used our money. And now, I had his name. I took a deep breath and forced my hands to relax. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not yet. I drove to my office, my mind already shaping the next move. By the time I arrived, I had a plan. I walked into my office, closed the door, and pulled out my laptop. Within minutes, I was accessing databases, running searches, pulling every piece of information I could find. Benjamin Reed was 39, unmarried, wealthy, but not as wealthy as me. He lived in a high-end apartment downtown. And, most importantly, he worked for a competing firm. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Now, it made sense. Laura wasn't just having an affair. She was cheating with a man who could benefit from our marriage. Had she given him information? Had she leaked confidential financial details in between their hotel stays and secret vacations? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with a traitor. And now, I knew exactly where to strike first. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady. It was time to make some very strategic moves. Laura had played her game well, but she didn't realize something. She was playing against me, and I never lost. I sat in my office, staring at Benjamin Reed's profile on my laptop screen. The name felt foreign, yet intimately tied to my life now. He had taken something that didn't belong to him. My wife, my marriage, my trust. The old me, the man before last night, might have reacted with raw emotion. But that version of me was gone. I wasn't going to be reckless. I was going to be precise. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. What was the next move? Benjamin worked at Ashwood Capital. They were a mid-sized firm, not as powerful as my company, but still a name in the industry. If he was in investment consulting, then he dealt with high-profile clients, money that moved in silence. The kind of money that could be influenced. I needed to know how deep this ran. Was it just an affair, or was there more? Had Laura been feeding him information? I grabbed my phone and dialed a number. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Michael, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I smirked. Derek Coleman, an old friend from my early days in finance, now one of the top corporate investigators in the city. I need a deep dive on someone, I said, keeping my tone casual. Benjamin Reed, Ashwood Capital. A short pause. Then Derek chuckled. Sounds serious. You suspect something dirty. Let's just say I need to confirm a few things. Give me a few hours. I'll send you everything I find. Appreciate it, I said before ending the call. I trusted Derek. If there was anything hidden in Benjamin's life, Derek would find it. Now, there was just one more thing to handle. Laura. I hadn't confronted her yet. I had let her wake up, go about her day believing nothing had changed. She thought she was still in control of her secret. She wasn't. I scrolled through my phone, checking her location. A habit we had developed over the years, under the pretense of safety. She was at a cafe downtown. I checked the time. 10:30 a.m. Interesting. Laura wasn't a morning cafe person, but I knew who was. I grabbed my keys and left the office. The cafe was small, tucked between luxury boutiques, the kind of place where people had quiet affairs over overpriced lattes. I parked across the street, watching through the tinted windows. And then I saw her, Laura, sitting at a corner table, her fingers tapping nervously against her cup. A few minutes later, Benjamin walked in. I had prepared myself to see him in person, but seeing him so comfortable, so familiar with my wife, it took everything in me to stay seated. I clenched my jaw, watching as he sat down across from her. She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. Body language was enough. Laura wasn't giggling or touching his hand. This wasn't some playful rendezvous. This was a conversation about something important. I reached for my phone and snapped a photo of them. Not for evidence. No, I already had enough of that. This was for me. To remember the moment they lost. Benjamin glanced around, lowering his voice as he spoke. Laura listened, occasionally nodding. I checked the time again. 10:47 a.m. They had no idea I was there. No idea that I was already 3 steps ahead of them. I let them talk. Let them dig their own graves. Then, after 15 minutes, I got out of the car and walked across the street. I entered the cafe, the bell above the door chiming. Laura's back was to me, but Benjamin saw me immediately. His body stiffened. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Good. He knew exactly who I was. Laura noticed his change in demeanor and followed his gaze. When she saw me, her face drained of color. Michael, she stammered, her fingers tightening around her cup. I gave her a slow, easy smile. Didn't expect to see you here, I said, my voice calm. Benjamin shifted uncomfortably. I was just leaving, he muttered, already reaching for his coat. Coward. I didn't stop him. Not yet. I pulled out a chair and sat across from Laura. The same seat Benjamin had just vacated. She swallowed hard, placing her cup down. What are you doing here? She asked, forcing a smile. I could ask you the same, I replied, leaning back. Cafe meetings during work hours? That's not like you. Laura hesitated. She was a skilled liar. But I was better. It's just a business meeting, she said quickly. A friend of my father's. Nothing important. She was still trying to control the narrative. Still underestimating me. Right? I said, nodding. A friend of your father's. She exhaled, relieved that I seemed to believe her. She had no idea that I already had her lover's name, his job, and his connection to her. I wasn't here to confront her yet. I was here to see how deep she was willing to bury herself in lies. And she had just dug the hole even deeper. You should have told me, I added smoothly, picking up the sugar packet from the table, rolling it between my fingers. I could have introduced myself. Maybe even helped with whatever business you're discussing. Laura forced a laugh. Oh, it's nothing you'd be interested in, she said quickly. Just financial stuff. She really thought she could keep up the act. I let her sit there, believing she was still fooling me. Because when I finally made my move, when I finally revealed everything I knew, I wanted to see the exact moment her world collapsed. I smiled. I trust you, I said, finishing my coffee. And in that moment, Laura had no idea just how much she was about to lose. I drove back to my office in silence, my mind a battlefield of calculated thoughts. Laura had lied to my face. Not hesitated, not stumbled, just smoothly fabricated a false reality like it was second nature to her. And maybe it was. Maybe I had been living in her version of reality for years, blind to the cracks that had been there all along. But the man who had been sleeping with my wife and, if Derek was right, doing a whole lot worse behind the scenes. I took the elevator straight to my office, closing the door before pulling up my laptop. My inbox had a new message from Derek with an attachment labeled Read Report. I opened it. The first few lines told me everything I needed to know. Multiple offshore accounts under fake business names. A history of insider trading allegations. No formal charges, but strong evidence. Confidential client data leaks traced back to him. Connection to a high-profile money laundering case, currently under federal investigation. I sat back, staring at the screen. Benjamin wasn't just some random guy sleeping with my wife. He was a criminal. And Laura? Did she know? Had she willingly tangled herself in this? Or was she another pawn in his game? It didn't matter. Because now, I had something far bigger than just an affair. I had power, and I knew exactly how to use it. I reached for my phone and dialed Derek. He picked up instantly. "You got the file?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "And I need more." "What kind of more?" "Direct proof. Something I can use to sink him. Fast." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Michael, this guy is playing with fire. You sure you want to get in the middle of that?" I smirked. "I don't plan on standing in the middle," I said. "I plan on watching from above while he burns." A low chuckle on the other end. "I like that," Derek said. "Give me 24 hours. I'll get you everything." I hung up and leaned back, tapping my fingers against the desk. 24 hours. That was all I needed. By this time tomorrow, Benjamin Reed would be a ruined man. That evening, I arrived home earlier than usual. Laura was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. Like a devoted wife. Like nothing had changed. "You're home early," she said, flashing me a smile. "Yeah," I replied, loosening my tie. "Thought I'd spend some time with my wife." She blinked, caught off guard. "That's sweet," she said carefully. I walked up to her, resting a hand on her lower back. "You've been busy lately," I murmured. "Meetings, trips, business calls. Maybe I've been a little too distant." She let out a soft laugh. "It's fine, Michael. You don't have to." "But I want to," I interrupted smoothly. "In fact, I was thinking, why don't we take a trip? Just the two of us." I watched her face closely, and there it was. A flicker of panic. Gone in an instant, but I caught it. "A trip," she repeated, forcing a smile. "That's so sudden. I have a lot going on at work." "You're always working," I said softly, brushing my thumb over her hip. "Come on, Laura. Let's take a break. Somewhere private." She hesitated. Then, she lied again. "Maybe next month?" she offered. I smiled. "Sure," I said, leaning in to kiss her temple. "Next month won't matter, Laura, because by then, your entire world will be unrecognizable." That night, while she was asleep, I sat in my home office, reviewing the file Derek had sent me again. Every detail, every transaction, every thread of corruption that tied Benjamin to his crimes. And then, I did something I knew would set everything in motion. I composed an email. Not to the police, not to a lawyer, but to someone who had more power than both. A rival firm. One that had been looking for an opportunity to take down Ashwood Capital for years. And now, I was handing them a loaded gun. I kept the message short, attaching only what they needed to see. Then, I hit send. And just like that, the fall of Benjamin Reed had begun. Laura had thought she was safe. She had thought she could play this game forever. But she didn't know the truth. She wasn't playing the game. She was the game. And I was about to end it. The next morning, I woke up before Laura again. The room was still dim, early morning light creeping through the curtains, but my mind was already sharp, focused. Today was the day everything started to unravel. I got out of bed without making a sound, moving to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. Steady hands, calm breathing, controlled thoughts. Laura stirred slightly in bed, but didn't wake. Good. By the time she opened her eyes, her world would already be on fire. I checked my phone as I dressed. No messages from Derek yet, but that didn't matter. I had already set things in motion. Benjamin Reed wouldn't know it yet, but his entire career, reputation, and financial empire were about to collapse. And Laura? She would have no choice but to watch it happen. By the time I arrived at my office, the storm had begun. I walked into the lobby of Sterling Financial Group, nodding at the receptionist before stepping into the elevator. A few of my colleagues were talking in hushed voices, scrolling through their phones with furrowed brows. Something was happening. I stepped off the elevator, heading straight to my office. As soon as I sat down, my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Turn on the news. I grabbed the remote and flipped to a financial news channel. And there it was. Breaking news. Investment consultant Benjamin Reed under investigation for insider trading and fraud. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smirk forming. The report detailed leaked evidence of his offshore accounts, illegal financial dealings, and client data leaks. A formal investigation had already been launched, and Ashwood Capital had publicly distanced themselves from him. Benjamin Reed was finished, and this was only the beginning. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. Laura's perfect little affair had just imploded. I knew what was coming next. The panic, the desperation, and sure enough, my phone rang. Laura. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my tone casual. Morning. Her voice was shaking. Michael, have you seen the news? I pretended to check. Something about Ashwood Capital? Sounds messy. She exhaled sharply, like she was struggling to breathe. She was afraid. Not just for Benjamin. For herself. Michael, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice almost pleading. I smiled. I'm at work. Can it wait? Silence. I could practically hear her mind racing. Please, she said. Just meet me for lunch. It's important. I let a long pause stretch between us before answering. Fine. 12:30, Matteo's. A high-end Italian restaurant. Neutral ground. Thank you, she whispered before hanging up. I set my phone down, staring at the news ticker on the screen. Benjamin Reed had lost everything in one morning, and Laura had nowhere left to hide. At exactly 12:30, I walked into Matteo's. Laura was already there, sitting in a booth, her face pale, hands clenched together on the table. She looked up as I approached, her eyes searching my face for something. Pity? Forgiveness? Neither were coming. I slid into the seat across from her, taking my time unfolding the napkin, placing it neatly on my lap. So, I said, lifting an eyebrow. What's so urgent? Laura swallowed hard. Michael, I need to tell you something. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Go on. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. I made a mistake, she whispered. I kept my expression unreadable. A mistake. She took a shaky breath. I got involved in something I shouldn't have. Benjamin. He wasn't who I thought he was. She hesitated. He used me. I let the silence stretch, watching her crumble. This was exactly where I wanted her. Desperate. Scared. Helpless. Used you how? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Her lower lip trembled. I thought it was just a relationship. But he had me sign things, transfer information. I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late. She was confessing. Not the affair. The crime. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. That's unfortunate, I said, my voice calm. Because I assume you know what happens next. Her eyes widened. Michael, you were complicit, I interrupted smoothly. Whether you knew or not, you helped him. You transferred financial data, signed illegal documents. And now it's all coming to light. Her breath hitched. I didn't mean. Intent doesn't matter in court, Laura. She visibly flinched. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, she whispered. Help me. You have connections, lawyers. I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head. Why would I do that? She froze. Her world had officially collapsed, and I was walking away from the ruins. I took out my wallet, pulled out a few bills, and placed them on the table. Lunch is on me, I said, standing up. Laura stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, completely speechless. I leaned down, lowering my voice to a whisper. You destroyed everything we had, I said. Now you get to watch as everything you have burns. Then, without another word, I walked away, leaving her behind in the wreckage she had created. I walked out of Matteo's without looking back. I didn't need to see Laura's face to know what she was feeling. Panic, fear, the crushing weight of her own downfall. She had lied, cheated, and betrayed me, and now she was begging for my help. The irony was delicious. I slid into my car and took a deep breath, letting the moment settle. The job wasn't finished yet. Laura's world was falling apart, but I had no intention of stopping until there was nothing left for her to cling to. As I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed. A message from Derek. It's done. Reed's assets are frozen. He's got feds crawling all over him. If your wife was involved, she's about to be in deep trouble. A slow smirk spread across my face. Perfect. By the time I got back to my office, my assistant was waiting at the door. Mr. Carter, Your wife called 3 times. She said it was urgent. I adjusted my tie. Ignore any future calls from her, I said smoothly. She nodded, stepping aside as I entered my office. I already knew what Laura wanted. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She wasn't calling because she regretted the affair. She was calling because she knew what was coming. And she was terrified. I sat down and checked my emails. Among the usual business reports and client inquiries, there was one message that stood out. From unknown sender. Subject, we need to talk. Now. I clicked on it. Michael, you don't know me, but we have something in common. I know all about Benjamin Reed, and I know your wife isn't as innocent as she's pretending to be. If you want answers, meet me tonight. 9 p.m. Monroe Park. I narrowed my eyes. Who the hell was this? I leaned back, weighing my options. It could be a setup. It could be someone looking to blackmail me. Or worse, a desperate move from Laura. But my instincts told me to go. If someone had more dirt on Laura and Benjamin, I wanted to hear it. And if it was a trap, well, I wasn't a man who walked into anything unprepared. At exactly 9 p.m., I pulled into a dark parking lot near Monroe Park. The area was empty, the streetlights flickering above, casting eerie shadows across the pavement. A lone figure stood near the fountain, hands in his pockets. I stepped out of the car, keeping my posture relaxed but alert. As I approached, the man turned. I recognized him immediately. One of Benjamin Reed's former colleagues. Interesting. You must be Michael Carter, he said, eyeing me carefully. And you must be someone with information worth my time, I replied. He let out a short laugh. Straight to business. I like that. I crossed my arms. Start talking. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through a few files before turning the screen toward me. Transaction records. Dozens of them. All signed by Laura. My jaw tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. What exactly am I looking at? Your wife wasn't just helping Reed cover up his dirty deals, he said. She was actively involved. These aren't just mistakes, or I didn't know what I was signing excuses. She knew. She played along. She profited from it. The weight of his words settled in. This wasn't just betrayal. This was criminal. Why are you showing me this? I asked. The man pocketed his phone. Because Reed is about to go down hard, and anyone tied to him is getting dragged with him. I figured you'd want to know just how deep your wife is in before the authorities start knocking on your door. I exhaled slowly. So Laura hadn't just destroyed our marriage. She had destroyed her entire future. What do you want in return for this? I asked. He smirked. Nothing. Just enjoy the show. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the dark sky, the cold air biting against my skin. Laura had played with fire. And now, she was about to burn. I arrived home just before midnight. Laura was waiting in the living room, pacing back and forth. The moment I walked in, she ran toward me. Michael, I need to explain. Sit. She hesitated, her eyes darting around. Michael, please, I just need you to. Sit. Down. The steel in my voice left no room for argument. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. I took my time, removing my coat, rolling up my sleeves. Then, I pulled out my phone and opened the file the man had shown me. I turned the screen toward her. Her face went white. Recognize these? I asked coolly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. You weren't just cheating on me, Laura. I stepped closer, towering over her. You were committing fraud. You were helping a criminal move money. And you knew exactly what you were doing. She shook her head rapidly. No, Michael, I swear I didn't. Don't. Lot. She flinched. The authorities will see these transactions, Laura. They'll see your name on those records. And when they do, they won't care about your excuses. Tears spilled down her face. Michael, please. I made a mistake. I crouched down in front of her, my voice cold and calm. No, Laura. You made choices. And now, you're out of options. She sobbed into her hands. What do I do? She whispered. I tilted my head. That's the funny part, I said softly. It's not up to you anymore. She looked up, confused. What do you mean? I stood up, straightening my sleeves. I mean that I already sent everything to the authorities. Her breath hitched. She stared at me like I had just stabbed her in the chest. You didn't. I smiled. I did. She shot to her feet, pure desperation in her eyes. Michael, please, we can fix this, we can. A knock on the door cut her off. She froze, her whole body trembling now. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. I think that's for you. She turned slowly, her face drained of all color. Another knock. Louder this time. And then, a voice. Mrs. Carter, this is the FBI. We need to speak with you. Laura's world had just ended, and I was there to watch it happen. The knock at the door echoed through the apartment like a final bell tolling the end of Laura's carefully constructed world. She stood frozen, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps, her fingers gripping the hem of her dress like a child caught in a nightmare. Another knock. Louder this time. Mrs. Carter, this is the FBI. Open the door. I watched her carefully. She wasn't just afraid, she was breaking, and I wasn't going to stop it. Michael, she whispered, turning to me, her voice raw with desperation. Please, tell me you didn't. I folded my arms, leaning casually against the wall. Didn't what? I asked smoothly. Tell the authorities about your little side business? Give them all the proof they needed? Oh, Laura, you gave them everything yourself. I just made sure they knew where to look. Her body visibly sagged. Another knock. This time, it was accompanied by the unmistakable weight of authority. Mrs. Carter, this is your last warning. Open the door, or we will enter by force. Laura's hands trembled as she reached for my arm. Michael, I swear, I didn't know, I didn't think. I gently pried her fingers off me, stepping away. That's the problem, Laura. I sighed. You didn't think. Tears pooled in her eyes. I could see it now, the full realization hitting her like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was her life unraveling at the seams. I turned toward the door and pulled it open. Two agents stood in the hallway, their dark suits crisp, their expressions blank but firm. Mrs. Carter, the lead agent asked. Laura couldn't move. She was frozen, drowning in her own terror. I tilted my head. She's inside, I said, stepping aside. The agents moved in swiftly, one pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Laura Carter, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding and abetting financial crimes, and obstruction of justice. Laura let out a strangled gasp. Her knees buckled, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. Michael, please, she screamed, as the cold steel of the cuffs locked around her wrists. Her voice cracked, not with anger, not with defiance, with pure, unfiltered despair. But I didn't move. I didn't reach for her. I didn't try to stop it. Because this was her doing. This was her consequence. One of the agents guided her toward the door, reading her rights in a steady monotone. Laura whipped her head around, wild-eyed, pleading. You're my husband. You can stop this. You can fix this. I met her gaze with nothing but cold detachment. I was your husband. I corrected. You made sure that ended long before tonight. Her lips trembled. She shook her head, silent tears streaming down her face. I loved you, she whispered. I smiled. No, Laura. You love the lie. And now? You get to live with the truth. The agents led her out the door, her soft sobs fading into the hallway. I waited until I heard the elevator doors slide shut before letting out a slow, deep breath. Silence. For the first time in years, I felt light. No more pretending. No more lies. No more Laura. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Laura Carter arrested in connection to Benjamin Reed's financial scandal. Investor's wife caught in fraud case. Did she know all along? I sat in my office, watching as every major news network picked apart the details. Benjamin Reed was already in federal custody. His career was dead. His reputation? Buried. And Laura? She was the collateral damage. She had wanted a different life. Now she had one, a life behind bars. My assistant knocked on the door, peeking in. Sir, there's someone here to see you. I frowned. Who? She hesitated. Your father-in-law, Mr. Hayes. I exhaled slowly. Of course. Send him in. Moments later, Laura's father walked into my office, his face tight, his shoulders stiff. He sat down without waiting for permission, staring at me for a long moment. You destroyed my daughter. I met his gaze evenly. She destroyed herself. He scoffed, shaking his head. You could have saved her. You could have covered for her. I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the desk. She didn't cover for me when she was screwing another man. Silence. His jaw tensed. He knew I was right. He knew Laura had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. You were a good man to her, Michael, he said finally. But you didn't have to end her like this. I tilted my head. She ended me first. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then he stood up. I hope this brings you peace, he said. I gave a small smile. It already has. He left without another word. I sat there, staring at the door for a few moments, letting the last piece of Laura's world fade away. Then, I picked up my phone, dialed a familiar in. We ended the call, and I sat there for a moment, staring out at the city skyline. The world looked different now. Clearer. Freer. Laura had taken everything from me. But in the end, I had taken everything from her. And I never looked back. The next few days passed in a blur. I had spent years building a life with Laura, and now she was gone. Not just from my home, not just from my heart, from the world outside these walls. She was locked away, awaiting trial, and every news outlet was ripping her apart. They called her the deceiver wife. They labeled her a silent accomplice. They speculated on whether she had planned it all from the beginning. If she had ever really loved me. I knew the answer. She loved what I could give her. She loved the life I built for her. But love? Real, unwavering love. No. She had thrown that away the moment she chose someone else. I should have felt relief. Satisfaction. And in some ways, I did. But there was an emptiness now. A quietness in my life that I hadn't expected. The absence of betrayal was like a room that had been filled with noise for so long that the silence felt unnatural. And I wasn't sure what to do with it. I took a few days off work, ignoring the influx of messages from people I barely knew. Sympathy from those who suddenly cared, curiosity from those who wanted to see if I'd fall apart. I didn't. Instead, I packed a bag and left the city for a while. I had told Derek I needed a vacation. Maybe I actually meant it. I found myself in a quiet town a few hours away, staying in a hotel with no business meetings, no reporters, no past hanging over my head. The air was fresh. The streets were calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't watching my back. One evening, I sat at the bar of the hotel's lounge, nursing a whiskey, letting the warmth settle in my chest. Rough day. I glanced up. A woman had taken the seat next to me. She wasn't overly dressed up, not the kind of person who was trying to be noticed. Just simple elegance. Someone who carried herself with quiet confidence. More like a rough few years, I said, smirking slightly. She tilted her head, studying me. You look like someone who just got out of a war. I let out a short laugh. Something like that. She smiled, raising her glass in a silent toast. To survival, then. I clinked my glass against hers. To survival. We talked for a while. Not about the past. Not about Laura. Just about life. About everything and nothing at the same time. She had been traveling for work, taking a break before heading back. She didn't ask for details about me. She didn't ask if I was married. She didn't pry. And maybe that's why I stayed in that conversation longer than I expected. Because for the first time, I wasn't being defined by betrayal, revenge, or the wreckage of my past. I was just me. No carefully laid plans. No strategy. Just a man sitting at a bar, talking to a stranger. And maybe, for the first time in a long time. That was enough. The next morning, I packed up my things and headed back to the city. The break had been good. But I wasn't the kind of man who ran away from things. I had built my life from the ground up. And now, it was time to rebuild it. Not with Laura. Not with the past. But with a clean slate. By the time I stepped back into my office, I felt lighter. No more uncertainty. No more hesitation. I sat at my desk and pulled out my phone. There was a message from my lawyer. Divorce finalized. It's over. I stared at those words for a moment. And then I smiled. It was over. Completely. And for the first time in far too long. I was free. The city skyline stretched before me, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. From my office window, everything looked the same. Cars crawling through the streets, pedestrians lost in their own little worlds. But inside me, everything had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by deception. No more second-guessing every moment. No more watching my back. No more questioning who I was married to. Laura was gone. Officially. Legally. Permanently. The divorce was finalized. And with it, so was that chapter of my life. I exhaled slowly, rolling my sleeves up as I sat back in my chair. The silence of my office was almost comforting now. No texts from Laura. No excuses. No more lies tangled in sweet words. Just me. And a future I controlled. That evening, I took a walk through the city, feeling like I was seeing it differently. For years, I had walked these streets believing I had everything figured out. Believing that my life, my marriage, my career, my choices were all part of some perfect plan. I had been wrong. And yet, I had survived. Hell, I had done more than survive. I had won. Not in the petty sense, not in a way that meant I was sitting here gloating about what had happened to Laura, but in the sense that I had taken back control. I had been betrayed. I had been deceived. I had been pushed into a situation that could have broken me. And yet, here I was. Stronger. Smarter. Wiser. I wasn't the man Laura had married anymore. I was something better. I ended up at a quiet rooftop bar, ordering a whiskey as the city hummed below. As I sipped my drink, my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Drink soon? Gotta celebrate your new life. I smirked. New life. That was exactly what this was, wasn't it? I typed back a quick reply. Absolutely. I set the phone down and took another slow sip of whiskey, letting the warmth settle in my chest. No regrets. No lingering doubts. Just the knowledge that I had walked through the fire and come out on the other side. Whole. Free. And completely, undeniably, untouchable.
When I met Lisa, she was everything I thought I wanted. Confident, charming, and full of life. She had this magnetic energy, the kind that made people gravitate toward her in a crowded room. Back then, I thought her outgoing nature was one of her best qualities. Now I wasn't so sure. Our marriage wasn't always like this. In the beginning, we were a team, a partnership built on what I thought was mutual respect and love. I worked hard, building my business from the ground up while Lisa brought warmth and charisma to our home. We complemented each other, or so I believed. But over the past year, something shifted. It started small, as these things often do. Lisa became distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She'd recently taken on a volunteer project at a local art gallery, and I figured the long hours and new responsibilities were taking their toll. But then there were the late nights, the vague explanations, the half-hearted apologies when she didn't show up for dinner. I remember the first time I asked her about it. It was a Tuesday night, and she'd come home hours after she said she would, her makeup slightly smudged and her hair smelling faintly of a cologne that wasn't mine. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the storm brewing in my chest. "With Alex," she replied casually, tossing her purse onto the couch. "We grabbed drinks after the gallery meeting. I told you about that, didn't I?" She hadn't. I was sure of it. But when I pointed that out, she just rolled her eyes. "You're being paranoid, David. He's just a friend. I don't know why you always jump to conclusions." That became her mantra. He's just a friend. Every time I asked, every time her stories didn't quite add up, that's what she told me. And every time I tried to believe her. I told myself I was being overly suspicious, that my doubts were a reflection of my insecurities, not her actions. But it was hard to ignore the patterns. The way her phone was always face down on the table. The way she suddenly had meetings or events that never seemed to end when they were supposed to. The way she lit up when she talked about Alex, his sense of humor, his taste in music, his insights into art. One night, I asked her outright, "Lisa, are you seeing someone else?" Her reaction was immediate, and not what I expected. She didn't get defensive or angry. Instead, she laughed. "David, do you even hear yourself? Alex is just a friend. Why would you even think that?" I couldn't tell her why. Not without sounding crazy. But there was something about the way she said his name, the way her eyes softened and her lips curled into a faint smile, that made my stomach twist. Still, I let it go. What else could I do? I didn't have proof, just a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. And Lisa was so good at reassuring me, at making me doubt my own instincts. But the doubts didn't go away. They only grew stronger, especially as her behavior became harder to ignore. She started dressing differently, sleeker, more polished. Her laughter felt more distant, as if she were somewhere else even when we were in the same room. And the intimacy between us? That was the biggest casualty of all. It wasn't just physical. It was in the little things. The way she stopped holding my hand when we walked together. The way she no longer asked about my day or shared hers in return. Our conversations became transactional, reduced to logistics and surface-level pleasantries. I started dreading the nights when she came home late, smelling like someone else's cologne. I hated the mornings when she left early without a goodbye, her phone buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. And most of all, I hated how powerless I felt. I tried to confront her again, this time more directly. Lisa, I feel like we're drifting apart. Is there something you're not telling me? Her response was almost pitying. David, you're imagining things. Maybe you should focus on your work instead of overanalyzing everything I do. Focus on my work. That was her answer to everything. And in a way, she wasn't wrong. My work was the one thing I could control, the one area of my life where I still felt competent. But even that started to suffer under the weight of my doubts and frustrations. By the time Alex became a regular name in our arguments, I'd stopped asking questions. What was the point? Every time I brought him up, it ended the same way, with her accusing me of being insecure, controlling, or paranoid. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but the idea felt too extreme, too final. If I went down that road, there would be no turning back. So instead, I kept my suspicions to myself and tried to focus on the parts of our marriage that still worked, however few they were. But even as I tried to ignore the cracks in our foundation, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa was slipping further and further away from me. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to hold on anymore. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The night of the party felt like a crossroads before I even walked through the door. I couldn't quite explain it, but there was this weight in the air, as though the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. It wasn't just any party. It was an annual event hosted by one of my business partners, Richard. These gatherings were the epitome of high society, elegant, glittering affairs where everyone seemed to have something to prove. Lisa was unusually enthusiastic about this one. She'd spent days picking out her dress, a sleek black number that hugged her in all the right places. She'd gone to the salon, spent hours on her makeup, and even splurged on a pair of designer heels she'd been eyeing for weeks. Watching her get ready, I was reminded of the woman I fell in love with, the one who could light up a room without trying. But something about her excitement didn't sit right with me. It wasn't for me. And I knew it. As we pulled up to the venue, Lisa's mood was electric. She stepped out of the car, her confidence radiating like a beacon. I followed her inside, my gut already churning with unease. The party was everything you'd expect. Soft music, expensive champagne, and people laughing too loudly at each other's jokes. Lisa disappeared into the crowd almost immediately, a social butterfly fluttering from one conversation to the next. I hung back, sipping my drink and exchanging polite nods with acquaintances. This was her world more than mine, and I'd learned long ago that trying to keep up with her in these settings was a losing battle. And then I saw him. Alex. He was leaning against the bar, his posture casual but commanding. He had that air of someone who knew he was being watched and liked it. His smile was too easy, his laugh too loud, and his gaze was locked onto Lisa. I watched as her face lit up when she saw him, her steps quickening as she made her way over. The way he greeted her, leaning in close, his hand brushing her lower back, made my blood run cold. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. I wanted to walk over, to interrupt, to remind Alex and Lisa who she'd come with. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of what I'd see up close. Or maybe it was the growing realization that I was the outsider in my own marriage. For the next hour, I kept my distance, but my eyes never left them. They moved around the room together, laughing, talking, their heads bent close in a way that felt far too intimate. Lisa barely looked in my direction, as though I wasn't even there. It was like watching someone else's wife, someone else's life, unfold in front of me. At one point, Richard approached me, his jovial demeanor masking a hint of concern. "Your wife seems to be enjoying herself," he said, nodding toward Lisa and Alex. I forced a smile. She always does. But the words tasted bitter. Enjoying herself. That's what she called it, wasn't it? Just fun, harmless fun with her friend. But there was nothing harmless about the way she looked at him, the way her hand lingered on his arm, the way his gaze followed her every move. The breaking point came later that evening. I had moved closer to the bar, needing something stronger to dull the edges of my frustration. As I waited for my drink, I overheard snippets of their conversation. "You look stunning tonight," Alex said, his voice low and deliberate. Lisa laughed, a soft, melodic sound that used to belong to me. "Stop it. You're going to make David jealous." "Am I?" Alex replied, his tone dripping with mock innocence. "He doesn't seem to mind. Or maybe he's just used to it by now." My grip tightened around my glass. Used to it? The audacity of his words hit me like a slap, but it was Lisa's response that truly gutted me. She smirked, leaning closer to him. "David's harmless. He knows this is just friendly." Friendly. That word again. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest, its blade honed by months of denial and gaslighting. I could feel the stares of others nearby, could hear the murmured whispers that followed wherever Lisa and Alex went. The humiliation was palpable, and for the first time, I felt like I truly didn't belong. Not just at the party, but in her life. When she finally glanced my way, it was almost as an afterthought. Our eyes met across the room, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in hers. Guilt? Concern? Or was it just annoyance that I was still there, watching, waiting? By the time we left the party, my silence was heavy enough to fill the car. Lisa, of course, acted as if nothing was wrong. She chatted about the people she'd seen, the conversations she'd had, her tone light and carefree. It was infuriating. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I saw the way he looked at you," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Her response was immediate and unapologetic. "And I liked it. What are you going to do about it?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The casual cruelty of them, the way she didn't even bother to deny it. It was the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for months. I stared at her, searching for some sign of remorse, some hint that the woman I married was still in there somewhere. But all I saw was defiance. "Nothing," I said finally, my tone as cold as the ache in my chest. "I'll let him have you. I only fight for things with value." She didn't reply, and the silence that followed was deafening. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I'd already made up my mind. This wasn't just a rough patch. This wasn't something we could fix with an argument or an apology. This was the end. And deep down, I think Lisa knew it too. The morning after the party, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. It wasn't peace. No, far from it. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I had to do. There was no anger, no shouting, no impulsive decisions made in the heat of the moment. Just cold, calculated certainty. Lisa was still asleep when I got up. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a moment, watching her. She looked peaceful, as if she hadn't just shattered everything we'd built together the night before. It was a cruel irony, how someone could look so serene while leaving someone else in pieces. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, maybe even love. But there was nothing left. She had drained me completely. I went to the office downstairs and sat at my desk, opening my laptop. Over the next few hours, I systematically dismantled every connection we shared. Bank accounts, credit cards, investments. I closed or transferred everything with my name on it. I wasn't going to leave her with a single cent. I wasn't doing this out of spite. It was survival. Lisa had made her choices, and I wasn't going to bankroll her new life with Alex or anyone else. Once the financial ties were severed, I started packing. I didn't take much, just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, a few personal items. Everything else could stay. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a shell, a place where lies had been carefully cultivated and nurtured. I couldn't live there, not after everything. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't poetic or emotional, just a few lines that said everything I needed to say. You wanted him. Now you have him. Good luck. It was almost noon by the time Lisa woke up and came downstairs. I was sitting on the couch, my bags by the door. She froze when she saw them, her face a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What's this?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm leaving," I said simply, not bothering to sugarcoat it. Her eyes narrowed. "You're being ridiculous, David. Over one stupid comment at a party? Grow up." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that even surprised me. "This isn't about one comment, Lisa. It's about all the lies, the nights you didn't come home, the way you've treated me like a fool while you carried on with Alex or whoever else." Her face darkened. "I told you Alex is just a friend." I stood up, grabbing my bags. "Spare me. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime. You can keep pretending if it makes you feel better, but I'm done." For a moment, she looked panicked, like she was finally starting to understand what was happening. "You're seriously leaving? Just like that?" "Just like that," I said, my voice calm. "I only fight for things with value, Lisa. And you've made it very clear that this marriage doesn't have any." Her mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came out. I didn't wait for her to find them. I picked up my bags and walked out the door, closing it behind me without looking back. Leaving the house felt surreal. Everything I'd worked for, everything I thought my life was supposed to be, was behind that door. And yet, as I drove away, I felt lighter. It wasn't happiness, not yet. But it was freedom. The weight of Lisa's betrayal, the constant second-guessing, the humiliation. It was all starting to lift. I checked into a hotel that night, using the time alone to figure out my next steps. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Lisa. They started with anger. "You're overreacting. You'll regret this." Then they shifted to guilt-tripping. "I gave up so much for you, and this is how you treat me?" Finally, they turned desperate. "David, please, we can fix this. I'll do better, I promise." I didn't respond. What was there to say? She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she'd been caught. Sorry her actions had consequences. Sorry that her safety net was gone. Over the next few days, I started putting my life back together. I rented a small apartment in the city, just enough space for myself. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I focused on work, pouring my energy into the business that had always been my anchor. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but no one pried. For that, I was grateful. Meanwhile, Lisa was falling apart. Mutual friends started calling me, asking what had happened. "Lisa's been telling people you abandoned her," one friend said. "She's saying you left her with nothing." "She's not wrong," I replied. "I left her with exactly what she earned." Word spread quickly, and Lisa's carefully curated image began to crumble. Without access to my money, her lifestyle took a hit. The designer clothes, the fancy dinners, the lavish social events, all of it was gone. And with it, so were many of her so-called friends. I heard about her and Alex through the grapevine. It didn't take long for their affair to lose its spark. Without my resources, Lisa wasn't as appealing, and Alex wasn't exactly the knight in shining armor she'd painted him to be. Their relationship became volatile, full of fights and accusations. It was almost poetic in its irony. She'd traded stability for excitement and ended up with neither. One day, Lisa showed up at my office. I wasn't expecting her, but when my assistant buzzed me, I decided to let her in. I was curious, if nothing else. She looked different, tired, worn down. The confident, glamorous woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "David," she began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "What do you want, Lisa?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I miss us." I almost laughed. "Miss us? You didn't seem to miss us when you were with Alex? Or when you were spending my money while lying to my face?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel much of anything. "You have no idea what I've been through," she said, her voice breaking. "You're right," I replied, "and I don't care. You made your bed, Lisa. Now you get to lie in it." She left without another word, and as I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. She'd taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my dignity. But she couldn't take the man I was rebuilding piece by piece. By the time she was gone, I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back. It didn't take long for Lisa's fantasy to start unraveling. While I was rebuilding my life, Lisa was discovering that the grass she thought was greener wasn't grass at all. It was artificial turf. The shine of her affair with Alex dulled quickly when faced with the harsh light of reality. A reality I had predicted but didn't stick around to watch. I heard bits and pieces through mutual friends and acquaintances. People love to talk, especially when there's a scandal. "Have you heard about Lisa and Alex?" they'd ask, their voices a mix of curiosity and pity. I didn't press for details, but the stories found their way to me anyway. It wasn't surprising. Lisa's new relationship had started the way most bad relationships do, built on lies, selfishness, and the thrill of sneaking around. Once that thrill was gone, there was nothing left to hold it together. Alex, as it turned out, wasn't the Prince Charming Lisa had imagined him to be. Without my financial support, her life took a sharp nosedive. The house was mine, the accounts were mine, and every luxury she'd once taken for granted disappeared overnight. Her credit cards were useless, her designer wardrobe suddenly irrelevant when she couldn't afford to maintain the image she'd curated for herself. It didn't help that Alex wasn't exactly a pillar of stability either. He'd been drawn to Lisa because of the lifestyle I'd provided, mistaking her ability to spend money for a reflection of her worth. When that lifestyle evaporated, so did his patience. He wasn't interested in supporting her, not financially, not emotionally, not in any way that mattered. I heard about their first big fight from a friend who'd been at the same bar they were in. "It was ugly," he said, shaking his head. "He was yelling about how she's nothing without your money, and she stormed out. I almost felt sorry for her." Almost. I didn't. Lisa's calls and texts became sporadic after that. When she did reach out, it was never to admit she'd been wrong or to take responsibility for her choices. Instead, it was complaints about how hard her life had become. "David," one message read, "you don't understand how much I'm struggling. Alex and I had a fight, and I don't know what to do." Another said, "I need help. I made a mistake, and everything is falling apart. Please, can we talk?" I didn't reply to any of them. What was the point? Lisa wasn't looking for closure or reconciliation. She was looking for a lifeline, a way to crawl back to the comfort she'd so carelessly discarded. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't her safety net, her backup plan, her doormat. As weeks turned into months, Lisa's situation only worsened. I heard she'd moved out of the small apartment she'd shared with Alex after he'd finally had enough and kicked her out. Apparently their fights had escalated, with Alex blaming her for dragging him into a life of financial instability and Lisa accusing him of using her. Both were probably right. One of her friends, someone I barely knew, called me one afternoon. "David, I don't know if you care, but Lisa's not doing well," she said, her voice hesitant. "She's staying on someone's couch and barely getting by. Maybe you should talk to her." "Why?" I asked flatly. She made her choices. Let her deal with them. The friend didn't argue, and I appreciated that. I wasn't interested in playing the role of savior, not for Lisa. She'd made it clear that I wasn't enough for her when it mattered. Now she was finding out that the life she'd thought she wanted came with a price she couldn't afford. What I found fascinating, in a darkly ironic way, was how Alex's behavior mirrored Lisa's. Just as she'd taken me for granted, assuming I'd always be there no matter what, Alex had done the same to her. He thought he could live off the remnants of her old life without contributing anything of value himself. When it became clear that wasn't possible, he turned on her, revealing the kind of man he truly was: shallow, selfish, and quick to blame anyone but himself. Lisa, for all her flaws, wasn't stupid. She must have seen the parallels. I wondered if she ever thought about how she'd treated me when Alex was berating her for not being the woman he thought she was. I wondered if she recognized the irony when she realized she'd traded a stable, loving relationship for a man who cared more about appearances than substance. One night, I got a message from Lisa that was different from the others. It was longer, more introspective, almost like a journal entry she hadn't meant to send. David, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I can't stop thinking about what I did to us. Alex was never what I thought he was, and I see now how blind I was. I threw away something good, something real, for nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just needed to say that I'm sorry. Truly. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, before setting my phone down. There was no anger in her words, no excuses, no attempts to shift the blame. For the first time, Lisa sounded like someone who understood the weight of her choices. But I didn't reply. Not because I was still angry. By that point, I wasn't. I'd moved past the anger, the hurt, the bitterness. I didn't reply because it didn't matter. Lisa's apology, heartfelt as it might have been, couldn't change the past. It couldn't undo the damage or erase the betrayal. And it couldn't bring me back to a place where I wanted her in my life. The reality of her affair wasn't just that it had failed. It was that it had revealed the truth about both of us. Lisa had been chasing something that didn't exist, a fantasy of freedom and excitement that crumbled under the weight of real life. And I'd been holding on to someone who wasn't capable of valuing what we had. In the end, the affair wasn't the cause of our downfall. It was the symptom of something deeper, something broken that we'd both ignored for too long. And as painful as it was, I was grateful for the clarity it brought. Because now, for the first time, I could see the path forward, and it didn't include Lisa. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Walking away from Lisa and everything tied to her felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing where I'd land. But in that uncertainty, I found a strange kind of freedom. For the first time in years, my life was mine to shape, unburdened by her lies or my lingering doubts. The first few weeks were the hardest. The silence in my new apartment was deafening, a constant reminder of what I'd left behind. The little routines we'd shared, Sunday mornings with coffee, late-night movies on the couch, were suddenly replaced by an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. But over time, I realized that emptiness wasn't a void. It was a blank canvas. I poured myself into work, not as an escape, but as a way to regain control. My company had always been my anchor, the one thing I could rely on when everything else felt unstable. Now it became the foundation for my new life. I spent long hours at the office, not out of necessity, but because I wanted to build something that was entirely mine, free from Lisa's shadow. But it wasn't all about work. I began reconnecting with parts of myself I'd forgotten. I started going to the gym regularly, rediscovering the physical strength I'd neglected during the tail end of my marriage. Each session felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was capable of growth, of pushing through pain and coming out stronger. I also reached out to old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. At first, I was hesitant. What would I say? How would I explain what had happened? But as I opened up, I realized I wasn't alone. Many of them had their own stories of heartbreak and resilience, and their support became a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. One friend, Tom, convinced me to join a hiking group he was part of. At first, I wasn't sure it was my thing. I wasn't exactly the outdoorsy type. But on my first hike, standing at the top of a trail and looking out over miles of unspoiled landscape, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. There was something humbling about the mountains, their quiet strength and unyielding presence. It reminded me that life goes on no matter how broken you feel. In the midst of all this rebuilding, I started to think about what I really wanted. Not just in a relationship, but in life. Lisa had consumed so much of my energy, my focus, my identity. Without her, I was finally free to figure out who I was and what made me happy. I began trying new things, cooking classes, photography, even learning to play the guitar. Some of it stuck, some didn't. But it all helped me grow. And then, there was Rachel. I met her at a networking event I almost didn't attend. She was standing by the refreshment table, looking slightly out of place but undeniably radiant. There was nothing flashy about her. No dramatic entrances or over-the-top charisma like Lisa. Rachel's presence was quieter, steadier, but it drew me in nonetheless. We struck up a conversation, and I was struck by how genuine she was. She didn't try to impress me or dominate the conversation. She simply listened, asked thoughtful questions, and shared her own experiences with an honesty that felt refreshing. It wasn't love at first sight, nothing so dramatic. But there was a connection, one that grew stronger with every interaction. Rachel and I started seeing each other casually at first. Dinners, hikes, the occasional movie night. It wasn't about replacing Lisa or rushing into anything serious. It was about finding someone who valued me for who I was, someone who saw me as an equal rather than a stepping stone or a safety net. One night, as we sat on a park bench watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Rachel turned to me and said something that stayed with me. "You've been through a lot, but it doesn't define you. You're more than your past, David." She was right. My time with Lisa, as painful as it had been, didn't define me. It was a chapter in my story, not the whole book. And now, with Rachel by my side, I was ready to start writing the next one. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not just about love, but about life. I'd lost so much, but in the process, I'd found something far more valuable. Myself. And that, I realized, was worth more than anything I'd left behind. I wasn't surprised to hear that Lisa's life had taken a nosedive after I left. To be honest, I didn't relish the thought of her suffering. I'm not that kind of person. But I also couldn't deny the grim satisfaction of knowing she was finally experiencing the consequences of her choices. Choices she made freely, without regard for what they would cost. The whispers started small. Snippets of gossip passed along by mutual acquaintances. "Lisa's been couch surfing," one friend mentioned over coffee. "She and Alex broke up and she's struggling to keep it together." Another said, "She called me the other night crying. I've never heard her sound so lost." At first I shrugged it off. It wasn't my problem anymore. Lisa had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. But the stories kept coming, painting a picture of a woman unraveling under the weight of her own decisions. The breakup with Alex had apparently been brutal. Their relationship, built on deceit and the allure of something forbidden, couldn't survive the reality of financial hardship. Without my money to cushion her lifestyle, Lisa became a liability rather than an asset in Alex's eyes. The fights grew louder, the blame more pointed. According to what I heard, he called her out for being nothing without David's money, a cutting reminder of what she'd thrown away. Lisa, for her part, tried to stand her ground. But it's hard to argue when the truth is staring you in the face. She was left with no home, no income, and no support system. The friends who'd once flocked to her side at parties and events suddenly seemed too busy to return her calls. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from an old mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "David," she began hesitantly, "I thought you should know. Lisa's really struggling. She's staying with a friend, but it's not a stable situation. She's not in a good place." I listened, silent, as she detailed the latest chapter in Lisa's downfall. The debt piling up, the nights spent crying over what she'd lost, the growing realization that Alex had never cared about her the way she thought he did. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked when she finished. "I don't know," the friend admitted. "Maybe just reach out? She seems so lost." Lost. That was an understatement. Lisa had been lost for a long time. Long before Alex, long before the party, maybe even long before our marriage. But it wasn't my job to find her anymore. I told the friend as much, politely but firmly. "I've moved on," I said. "Lisa needs to figure this out on her own." Despite the calls, the gossip, and the lingering reminders of what we once had, I didn't dwell on Lisa's situation. My focus was on building a better life, one that wasn't tethered to the wreckage of our marriage. But as the months passed, I couldn't help but reflect on the lessons this whole ordeal had taught me. The first lesson was one of self-worth. For years, I had allowed Lisa's opinions, actions, and approval to define how I saw myself. I'd bent over backward to make her happy, to meet her expectations, to prove that I was enough. But the truth was, I'd always been enough. I just hadn't realized it until she was gone. I also learned that love isn't about convenience or appearances. It's about trust, respect, and mutual effort. Lisa had loved the idea of me, the stability and success I represented. But she hadn't truly loved me, not in the way that mattered. And maybe deep down, I hadn't truly loved her either. I'd loved the version of her I wanted to believe in, not the person she actually was. Another lesson was the importance of boundaries. I'd ignored my instincts for far too long, letting Lisa's charm and excuses override the doubts that gnawed at me. If I'd set firmer boundaries early on, maybe things would have turned out differently. Or maybe they wouldn't have, but at least I wouldn't have wasted so much time doubting myself. Lisa tried to contact me one last time. This time, it wasn't a call or a text. It was a letter, handwritten and delivered to my office. I opened it, half expecting another round of apologies or pleas for help. But what I found was something else entirely. "David," it began. "I don't know if you'll even read this, but I need to say these things, even if they don't reach you. I've made so many mistakes, and I've lost so much, but the biggest mistake was losing you. Not because of what you provided, but because of who you are. I didn't see it then, but you deserved so much better than the person I was. I'm sorry for everything, for the lies, the betrayal, the way I took you for granted. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. I just hope you find happiness, because you gave me so much of it, even when I didn't appreciate it."
I woke up that morning feeling the usual weight of the day ahead, the kind of weight that settles into your shoulders when you're used to being the steady one, the quiet one, the guy who doesn't make a fuss. My name's Julian Marsh, 34 years old, and I've always been the type to keep my head down and get things done. Harper, my wife, used to call me her rock back when we first got together, her voice soft and warm like she meant it. But lately, I'd started to feel more like something she was ashamed of, a crack in the perfect picture she wanted to show the world. That morning, she was in the kitchen, stirring her coffee, her eyes darting anywhere but at me. "Julian," she said, her voice clipped, "I need you to do me a favor. Claire's birthday dinner is tonight, and I don't think you should come." I stood there, halfway through tying my work boots, the laces still loose in my hands. Claire's her younger sister, the golden girl of the family, always loud and bright and full of plans. "It's a big night," Harper went on, still not looking at me. "She's introducing her new boyfriend, and it's kind of a special thing. I just think it'd be better if you stayed home." I opened my mouth to ask why, but she cut me off before I could. "I told them you had an accident," she said, her words rushing out like she'd rehearsed them. "It's easier that way." An accident. Like I'd tripped over my own feet and couldn't be trusted around polite company. I felt my chest tighten, a slow burn creeping up my neck. My job as a janitor, it's honest work, mopping floors and fixing what's broken. It's never bothered me. I like the simplicity of it, the way it keeps my hands busy and my mind clear. But standing there, watching Harper twist her coffee spoon between her fingers, I realized it bothered her. She'd turned my life into a lie-to-save face. Okay, I said, my voice flat, because what else was there to say? She didn't want me there, didn't want me next to her in front of her family, didn't want them to see the man she'd married. I finished tying my boots, grabbed my jacket, and walked out the door without another word. The air outside was cold, biting at my face as I headed to work, but it didn't cool the heat building inside me. I wasn't mad, not yet. I was just stunned, like I'd been slapped awake after years of sleepwalking through our life together. She'd asked me to stay home before, sure, for little things, a girl's night, a quick coffee with her mom, but this was different. This was Claire's big moment, and Harper had decided I didn't belong in it. I spent the day pushing a broom across the warehouse floor, the steady scrape of it against concrete keeping my thoughts from spiraling too far. I kept replaying her words. It's easier that way. Easier for who? For her? For Claire? For the boyfriend I'd never met? I pictured them all sitting around some fancy table, laughing and clinking glasses, while I sat alone in our cramped apartment. My hands tightened around the broom handle. I wasn't some dirty secret. I worked hard. I paid bills. I'd been there for Harper through every late-night rant about her family, every time she needed someone to lean on. And now she was pretending I didn't exist because, what? Because I didn't wear a suit to work? Because I smelled like cleaner instead of cologne? By the time I got home that evening, the apartment was empty. Harper had left a note on the counter, back late. Don't wait up. I crumpled it in my fist and tossed it in the trash. I didn't wait up. I didn't even turn on the TV. I just sat there in the dark, the silence pressing in around me, and wondered how long she'd been ashamed of me. How long I'd let her be. It wasn't about the dinner, not really. It was about the way she'd looked at me, or didn't look at me, like I was something to hide, something to explain away. I didn't argue with her that morning because I never argue. I'm not that guy. But as I sat there, staring at the wall, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a question. A big one. What was I to her, really? And what was I going to do about it? I didn't sleep much that night after Harper left for Claire's birthday dinner. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm the kind of guy who usually lets things roll off his back. But this stuck. The apartment felt too quiet without her. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my feet as I paced. I kept thinking about what she'd said, how she'd asked me to stay home, how she'd lied about an accident to keep me out of sight. It wasn't the first time she'd nudged me to the edges of her life, but it was the first time it felt like she'd pushed me right off the map. I didn't yell when she told me, didn't slam doors or throw anything. That's not me. I just nodded, grabbed my jacket, and let her have her way, same as always. But sitting there in the dark, the weight of it started to sink in, heavy and cold like a stone in my gut. I'd been quiet for her, steady for her, invisible for her, and I was tired of it. The next morning, I woke up early, the kind of early where the sky's still gray and the world hasn't quite started moving yet. Harper was still asleep, curled up on her side of the bed, her hair spilling across the pillow like nothing had changed. I didn't wake her. I made coffee, black and strong, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hands. I wasn't mad, not the shouting kind of mad, anyway, but I was done. Done being the guy who just takes it. I opened the banking app, the little green icon glowing on the screen, and started scrolling through the accounts. For the past 3 years, I'd been covering half the rent on her parents' lake house up north. It wasn't cheap, $600 a month, wired straight from my paycheck like clockwork. I'd set it up when her dad lost his job, back when Harper begged me to help, because family sticks together. I didn't mind then. I liked helping. It made me feel solid, useful. But now? Now it felt like I'd been paying to stay in the shadows. I tapped into the autopay settings and canceled it. Just like that. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The screen asked me to confirm, and I hit yes, without blinking. Then I moved to the next one, their internet bill. Another $80 a month I'd been footing because Harper said they couldn't afford it, and she didn't want her mom stressing about losing Wi-Fi. Canceled. Done. I kept going, line by line, cutting every tie I'd tied myself to. Claire's student loans were the last one. Harper had asked me to chip in a couple years back, just $200 a month, because Claire was struggling after college. I'd never said no, never asked for anything back. I'd just done it, month after month, because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You help their family. You carry the load. But as I sat there, staring at the numbers, I realized they'd never seen me as family. Not really. I was just the guy with the checkbook, the one they didn't even want at their table. I canceled that payment too. My finger hovered over the screen for a second, but then I pressed it, and it was gone. The account balance is updated, and I felt something lift, not much, just a little, like I'd taken a breath after holding it too long. I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I wasn't trying to start a war or get revenge. I just wanted to stop feeling like a ghost in my own life. Harper never asked where the money came from, never cared that I worked extra shifts sometimes to cover it all. She just assumed I'd keep going, keep giving, keep fading into the background so she could shine. And I'd let her. For years, I'd let her. I leaned back in the chair, the coffee going cold in my mug. The apartment was still quiet, the early light creeping through the blinds in thin, pale stripes. I thought about the lake house, those weekends we'd spend up there, me fixing the leaky sink while Harper and her mom sipped wine on the porch. I thought about Claire, how she'd smile and thank me for the help but never once asked about my day, my life, my anything. They took what I gave and didn't look twice at who was giving it. And Harper, she'd let them. She'd stood there and let them see me as less, all while I poured myself into keeping them afloat. I didn't tell her what I'd done when she woke up. She stumbled into the kitchen around 9, rubbing her eyes, muttering about how late the dinner ran. It was fun, she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Claire's boyfriend seems nice. You didn't miss much? I just nodded, watching her move around the kitchen like everything was normal. She didn't ask how my night was. Didn't notice the way I was looking at her, the way I was starting to see her differently. I kept my mouth shut, because that's what I do. I stay quiet. But inside, something was building. Not loud, not explosive, just steady. I'd stopped the payments, and that was the first step. The first time in a long time I'd done something for me instead of for her. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the weight of being invisible, the weight of being the guy she didn't want anyone to see. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink, the water running cold over my hands. Harper was still talking, something about the cake they'd had, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about what came next. I didn't know yet, not exactly, but I knew I wasn't going back to the way things were. I'd spent too long in silence, too long letting her decide what I was worth. And as I stood there, the faucet dripping, I realized I didn't need her to tell me who I was. I didn't need any of them to. I'd been their rock, sure, but I was done crumbling for them. The night of Claire's birthday dinner rolled around, and I stayed home like Harper asked. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the type to push back when someone draws a line. I usually just step behind it and keep my mouth shut. So there I was, alone in our little apartment, the walls feeling closer than usual, the quiet heavier than I liked. Harper had left around 6, her hair done up nice, wearing that blue dress she saves for special occasions. She'd kissed my cheek quick, said, "Thanks for understanding." And then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. I didn't understand, not really, but I didn't say that. I just let her go, same as always. I made myself some pasta, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with sauce from a jar, and sat on the couch with a fork in my hand, the TV off, the room dark except for the kitchen lights spilling in. I wasn't mad yet. I was just there, chewing slow, waiting for something to make sense. I kept picturing them at the restaurant. Harper, Claire, her parents, this new boyfriend I didn't know. I wondered what they were saying about me, if they even bothered to bring up the accident Harper had invented. Did they nod and move on, or did they laugh about it, relieved I wasn't there to drag things down? I stabbed at the pasta, twirling it around the fork, my stomach tight. I've never been the guy who needs to be the center of attention. I like my job, janitor at a warehouse, because it's steady, simple. I clock in, clean up, clock out. No one bothers me, and I don't bother them. But sitting there, the sauce cooling on my plate, I started to feel like maybe I'd been too okay with that. Too okay with being the one nobody noticed. Around 8:15, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, loud enough to jolt me out of my thoughts. I figured it was Harper checking in, maybe saying she'd be late, but the screen showed Lily's name, Harper's cousin. She's younger, loud in a fun way, always dragging me into conversations at family stuff when no one else bothered. It was a video call, which threw me off. I almost let it ring out, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but something made me pick up. Curiosity, maybe, or just boredom. I hit accept, and there they were, all of them, crammed into the frame. Harper, Claire, her parents, a guy I didn't recognize. The restaurant was bright, fancy, with white tablecloths and candles flickering. Laughter spilled through the speaker, wine glasses clinking, decorations hanging in the background like this was some big celebration I didn't belong to. My face popped up in the corner of the screen, small and out of place, and for a second, no one noticed me. Lily must have propped her phone up on the table, forgetting it was on. I should have hung up. Should have put the phone down and gone back to my pasta. But I didn't. I watched, my grip tightening on the phone, as Harper leaned over to say something to Claire, her smile wide and easy. She looked happy, happier than she'd been with me in a while. Claire was laughing, her head thrown back, her new boyfriend grinning beside her. He was tall, dark hair, the kind of guy who looks like he belongs at a table like that. I felt my chest hollow out, not because I wanted to be there, but because I realized how much Harper didn't want me to be. Then it happened. The boyfriend, Damon, I'd learn later, leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Julian? Hey, boss." The words hit like a punch, sharp and sudden, and the whole table went still. Harper's head snapped toward the phone, her eyes wide, her face draining of color. Claire blinked, her mouth half open, like she didn't get it. "Boss?" she said, her voice small, confused. Damon straightened up, still grinning, oblivious to the tension starting to choke the air. "Yeah," he said, loud enough for me to hear every word clear as day. "Julian's one of the co-founders at Corvia Systems. We've been rolling out the logistics AI interface I told you about. He's kind of a big deal there." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, the phone warm in my hand, watching it all unfold. Harper's jaw clenched tight, her lips pressing into a thin line. Claire's parents turned to look at her, then at the screen, their faces shifting from confusion to something else, shock, maybe, or embarrassment. Lily grabbed the phone, fumbling with it, muttering, "Oops, didn't mean to," but it was too late. The truth was out, raw and messy, and I could see it hitting them all like a brick. I wasn't just a janitor. That's what they thought, what Harper let them think. The janitor gig was a cover, something I did to keep my hands busy, to stay grounded while I built something bigger. Corvia Systems was mine. Well, half mine. Me and my buddy Mark started it years ago, back when we were just two guys with a laptop and a dream. Now it's a multi-million-dollar tech firm, and I'm the guy behind the curtain, not mopping floors but designing systems that keep warehouses like the one I work at running smooth. Harper didn't know. She never asked. She saw the dirty boots, the plain clothes, and decided that was all I was. And she'd sold that story to her family, to Claire, to everyone. I hung up before anyone could say more. My thumb hit the red button, and the screen went black, the silence rushing back and around me. My pasta was cold now, the plate still half full, but I didn't care. I pushed it aside and leaned back on the couch, my heart thudding slow and steady in my chest. Damon's voice echoed in my head, "Hey, boss." And I almost laughed, but it didn't come out. Harper had spent years hiding me, ashamed of the man she thought I was, and now the guy dating her sister had blown it all wide open. I didn't plan it, didn't want it, even. But there it was, the truth, sitting there like a spilled drink on that fancy white tablecloth. I wondered what she'd say when she got home. If she'd try to explain, or just pretend it didn't happen. I wondered if she'd look at me different now, or if she'd just find a new way to keep me small. But as I sat there, the apartment dark and still, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her decide that for me anymore. I sat there on the couch, my phone still warm in my hand after I hung up on Lily's video call. "My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the guy who likes drama. I'd rather sweep it under the rug than deal with it." But that night, after Damon dropped the truth about me being a co-founder at Corvia Systems, there was no sweeping it away. The pasta I'd made was cold on the coffee table, the fork stuck in it like I'd forgotten what I was doing halfway through. I hadn't. I just couldn't move, couldn't think past the way Harper's face had gone white, the way Claire's mouth had dropped open, the way the whole room had frozen like someone hit pause on their perfect little party. Damon's voice, "Hey, boss," kept ringing in my ears, loud and clear, and I could still see the shock rippling across their faces. It wasn't funny, not really, but part of me wanted to laugh at how fast it all fell apart. I'd never told Harper about Corvia. Not the full story, anyway. She knew I worked as a janitor, saw me leave every morning in my old jacket and boots, assumed that was all there was to me. I didn't correct her. Didn't feel the need to. The tech stuff, building logistics AI, running a company worth millions, that was mine, something I kept separate because I liked the quiet of it. The janitor job was real enough. I took shifts at the warehouse to test our systems, see how they worked on the ground. It kept me honest, kept me connected to what we were making. But to Harper, it was just a dirty job, something to brush off when her family asked what I did. "Oh, Julian cleans up," she'd say, her voice light, like it was a joke. I let her think that because I didn't need her to see me as anything else. Until now. Now she didn't have a choice. The silence in the apartment was thick, pressing down on me as I replayed that moment in my head. Claire whispering, "Boss," like she couldn't wrap her mind around it. Harper's eyes locking onto the phone, wide and panicked, like she'd been caught stealing. Her parents turning to her, their faces tight with questions they didn't ask out loud. And Damon, grinning like it was no big deal, like he hadn't just smashed their whole world with 3 words. I didn't say anything back there on the call. I didn't have to. They saw me, really saw me, for the first time, and it wasn't because I wanted them to. It was because the lie Harper built couldn't hold up anymore. She'd told them I was nothing, a guy who mopped floors and stayed out of the way, and now they knew she was wrong. I wondered what that felt like for her, having her story crack open in front of everyone she cared about impressing. I got up and dumped the pasta in the trash, the plate clattering in the sink louder than I meant it to. My hands were steady, but inside, something was churning, not anger, not yet, just a slow, heavy realization. Harper didn't just hide me from them, she hid me from herself. She never asked about my day, never wondered why I'd come home late some nights or why I'd stare at my laptop for hours. She saw what she wanted to see, a quiet husband who didn't fit her shiny life, and I let her because I thought that's what love was. Giving her what she needed, even if it meant shrinking myself down to fit in her pocket. But watching her face on that call, the way she flinched when Damon said my name, I knew it wasn't love. It was convenience. I was easy to explain away until I wasn't. The clock on the wall ticked past 9 o'clock, then 9:30, and I stayed where I was, leaning against the counter, staring at nothing. I could have called her, demanded answers, but what would that change? She'd come home eventually, and we'd have to face it then. For now, I just let it sit there, the truth hanging in the air like dust after a storm. I thought about Damon, good kid, sharp, one of the best on our team at Corvia. He'd been talking about Claire for weeks, excited to meet her family, never knowing I was part of it. I liked him, respected him, and now he'd accidentally lit a match under everything Harper had tried to keep neat and tidy. I didn't blame him. He didn't know the mess he was stepping into. But Harper, she knew. She'd built this lie, brick by brick, and I'd handed her the mortar without even realizing it. I thought about the past 3 years, all the times I'd stayed quiet when she brushed me off. Family dinners where I'd sit at the end of the table, nodding along while they talked about Claire's latest adventure or her mom's new decorating project. I'd pay for half the lake house rent, fix their leaky pipes, send money for Claire's loans, and they'd smile and say thanks like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Harper never corrected them, never said, "Hey, Julian's more than that." She let them see me as the help, the guy who didn't matter, and I went along with it because I didn't want to rock the boat. But now the boat was sinking, and I wasn't the one who'd punched the hole in it. The front door creaked open around 10:15, and I heard her footsteps, soft and careful, like she wasn't sure what she'd find. "Julian," she called, her voice small. I didn't answer right away. I stayed where I was, arms crossed, watching her step into the kitchen. She looked different, tired, her makeup smudged under her eyes, her hair not so perfect anymore. "You're up," she said, setting her purse on the counter. I nodded, waiting. She fidgeted with her keys, her fingers twisting them over and over. "Lily didn't mean to call you," she started, her words rushing out. "It was an accident." "I didn't know," she stopped, her eyes flicking up to mine, then away. "I didn't know he worked for you." That's what she said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Just, "I didn't know," like that made it okay. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd married crumbling under the weight of her own excuses. "You didn't know because you never asked," I said, my voice low, steady. She flinched, but I didn't stop. "You decided who I was, Harper. And you were wrong." She opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands dropping to her sides. The room went quiet again, the truth sitting there between us, heavy and hard. I didn't yell. Didn't need to. She'd heard me, maybe for the first time, and that was enough. For now. I stood there in the kitchen, watching Harper fumble with her keys after she came home from Claire's dinner. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the guy who picks fights. I'd rather fix what's broken than break it more. But that night, after Damon spilled the truth about me being a co-founder at Corvia Systems, something inside me shifted. Harper's excuse, "I didn't know he worked for you," hung in the air like smoke, and I'd answered her with the plain truth. She never asked. She stood there, her blue dress wrinkled from the long night, her eyes darting to the floor, and I could see her trying to piece together something to say. I didn't give her the chance to spin it. I turned, walked to the living room, and left her standing there. My phone was still on the couch where I'd dropped it after the call, and when I picked it up, it lit up with her name. She was calling me from 10 feet away. I let it ring, the buzz filling the quiet, then watched it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. A text this time. "Please pick up. I'm sorry. I didn't know he worked for you. I was trying to protect you." Protect me. That word hit me like a slap, sharp and stinging. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over it, the glow lighting up my face in the dark. Protect me from what? From her family? From their judgment? From the life she'd decided I didn't fit into? I set the phone face down on the coffee table, the message unanswered, and grabbed a glass from the cabinet. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, just a splash, enough to steady my hands, and sat back down. The apartment was still, the kind of still that feels loud, and I let my mind run over it all. She didn't know Damon worked for me because she didn't know me. Not really. She saw the janitor boots, the quiet nods, the way I didn't push back, and she built a story around that. A story where I was small, simple, someone to tuck away when the lights got too bright. But I wasn't that guy, not all of me, anyway, and she'd never bothered to look deeper. The phone kept buzzing, little jolts against the wood, and I ignored it. Another text, "Julian, please." I didn't mean it like that. Then another, "Can we talk?" I didn't pick it up. I sipped the whiskey, the burn sliding down my throat, and thought about how long I'd let this go. 3 years married, 5 together, and I'd spent most of it bending for her. I paid for her parents' lake house, covered Claire's bills, stayed home when she asked, all because I thought that's what you do, support the person you love. But support's a two-way street, and Harper had been walking it alone, leaving me on the side with my hands empty. She didn't protect me. She protected herself all from having to explain me, from having to stand next to me and say, "This is my husband, and I'm proud of him." She didn't say that because she wasn't. Not until Damon opened his mouth and made me someone worth seeing. I leaned back, the couch creaking under me, and closed my eyes. The whiskey glass sat cold in my hand, half empty now, and I could hear her moving in the kitchen. Soft steps, the clink of her keys hitting the counter again. She didn't come in, didn't try to face me. Maybe she knew I wasn't ready to hear her, or maybe she didn't know what to say. Either way, the space between us felt wider than it ever had, a gap I hadn't noticed growing until now. I thought about the dinner, how she'd laughed on that call, how easy she looked without me there to weigh her down. I thought about how she'd lied about an accident, turned me into some clumsy fool who couldn't show up, all to keep her family from asking questions. Questions she didn't want to answer because she didn't respect the answers. The phone buzzed one more time, and I flipped it over. I messed up. "I see that now. Please don't shut me out." I read it twice, the words blurring a little, and set the phone back down. She messed up, sure, but it wasn't just about tonight. It was about every night, every day, every time she looked at me and saw less than I was. I finished the whiskey, the last drop bitter on my tongue, and got up to rinse the glass. The sink was still full of dishes, my pasta plate, her coffee mug from the morning, and I left them there. I wasn't cleaning up for her tonight. I wasn't doing anything for her tonight. I walked past the kitchen, past where she was standing with her arms crossed, staring at the floor, and went to the bedroom. "I'm going to bed," I said, my voice flat, not looking back. She didn't follow. I lay there in the dark, the sheets cool against my skin, and stared at the ceiling. The truth wasn't just about Corvia, about me being more than a janitor. It was about her, about how she'd decided I wasn't worth standing beside unless someone else said I was. She didn't call me to apologize for lying. She called because Damon changed the game, because now I wasn't just the guy she could hide. I wasn't mad, not the loud, shouting kind of mad, but I was done pretending it didn't hurt, done pretending I didn't see it. She'd spent years building a wall between us, brick by brick, and I'd handed her the tools to do it. But now I was on the other side, looking at it, and I didn't know if I wanted to climb back over. The bed felt too big without her, even though I didn't want her there right then. I rolled onto my side, my back to her empty spot, and thought about what protect really meant. To me, it was showing up, being there, taking care of what mattered. To her, it was keeping me out of sight, safe from her world, like I was something fragile or something shameful. I didn't need that kind of protection. I'd built a company from nothing, worked nights and weekends to make it real, and I didn't need her to shield me from anything. What I needed, what I'd always needed, was her to see me. Not the janitor, not the co-founder, just me. And she hadn't. Not until the room went quiet and the truth hit like a brick. I closed my eyes, the buzz of her text still echoing in my head, and decided I wasn't answering. Not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. Because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about me figuring out what I deserved. I woke up the next morning with the bed still empty beside me, the sheets on Harper's side untouched. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the type to dwell on what's gone wrong. I'd rather move forward than sit in the mess. But that morning, after the fallout from Claire's dinner, I couldn't shake the weight of it. Harper had slept on the couch, or maybe not at all. I didn't check. I'd heard her moving around in the night, quiet steps and the occasional creak of the floor, but I stayed in the bedroom, the door shut, letting the silence do its work. Her text from last night sat unanswered on my phone, a string of apologies and pleas I didn't want to read again. I got up, pulled on a shirt, and made coffee, the routine keeping my hands busy while my mind churned. The kitchen was dim, the early light barely cutting through the blinds, and I stood there with the mug warming my palms, thinking about what came next. My phone pinged again, but it wasn't Harper this time. It was an email from Damon, the guy who'd turned the dinner upside down without even meaning to. Subject line, apologies. I opened it, leaning against the counter, the coffee steaming beside me. Hey, Julian, it started. I didn't know you were Claire's brother-in-law. I feel like an idiot for how that went down last night. Hope I didn't mess things up too bad. Also, I ended it with Claire. Couldn't stay with someone who'd judge people like that over money. Respect, man. See you at work. I read it twice, the words sinking in slow and steady. Damon was a good kid, sharp, honest, one of the few at Corvia who didn't kiss up to me just because I was the boss. I liked that about him. And now he'd walked away from Claire because he saw through the same crap I was starting to see. I didn't reply, not yet, but I respected him more for it. He didn't owe me an apology, but he'd given one anyway. I was still holding the phone when it rang, the screen flashing Harper's mom's name, Ellen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Maybe I wanted to hear what she'd say, how she'd spin it. Julian, she said when I answered, her voice cold and clipped, like she was talking to a stranger. I heard everything. From Claire, from Harper. You made her look like a fool last night. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, my jaw tightening. Me. I'd made Harper look like a fool. Not Harper, who'd lied about me having an accident. Not Harper, who'd hidden me like I was something to be ashamed of. Me. The guy who wasn't even there. Ellen, I said, keeping my voice even. I didn't do anything. I wasn't at the dinner. You know that. She huffed, a sharp sound through the line. You could have told us who you were. All this time, letting us think. She stopped, like she didn't want to finish the thought. I didn't say anything back. Didn't argue. Just let her sit with it. She hung up after a long pause, the call cutting off with a soft beep, and I set the phone down, staring at it. Her words stuck with me, though, not because they were true, but because they showed me something. They thought I owed them an explanation, like I'd been tricking them by keeping quiet. But I hadn't. I'd just lived my life, worked my job, paid their bills, stayed out of their way, and they decided I was less because of it. Harper's family didn't care who I was. They cared what I looked like to other people. And when Damon blew that up, they didn't turn on Harper for lying. They turned on me for not fitting their story. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth, and thought about the lake house. The internet. Claire's loans. All those autopays I'd canceled yesterday. They'd figure it out soon. Probably already had. And I wondered what Ellen would say then. Probably that I was petty, selfish, cutting them off like that. But I wasn't. I was just done giving to people who took me for granted. Harper came out of the living room then, her hair messy, her eyes red like she hadn't slept. She stopped in the doorway, wrapping her arms around herself. You're up, she said, her voice small. I nodded, not looking at her, just stirring my coffee even though it didn't need it. Your mom called, I said, keeping it simple. She flinched, her shoulders hunching. What did she say? She asked. That I made you look bad. Harper's face crumpled a little, but she didn't argue. I didn't mean for this, she said instead, stepping closer. I didn't know it'd turn out like this. I set the mug down, finally meeting her eyes. You didn't know because you didn't want to, I said. You didn't want me there, Harper. You didn't want them to see me. That's on you. She opened her mouth, then closed it, tears welling up. I was wrong, she whispered. I see that now. I didn't say anything back. Just watched her, waiting to see if she'd keep going, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking lost. I turned away, grabbing my jacket from the chair. I'm going out, I said, pulling it on. Where? She asked, her voice cracking. Just out, I said, because I didn't know her more than that. I walked past her, out the door, and into the cool morning air. My truck was parked down the street, and I climbed in, starting it up with a rumble. I didn't have a plan, just needed to move, to think. I drove past the warehouse where I worked my janitor shifts, past the Corvia office downtown, past the life I'd built while Harper looked the other way. The pretenses were gone now. All the little lies she'd told herself and her family collapsing under the weight of the truth. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from her, not from them, not from myself. And as I turned onto the highway, the city fading behind me, I realized I didn't care what they thought. Not Ellen, not Claire, not even Harper. I was done carrying their expectations. Done letting them decide my worth. The road stretched out ahead, open and quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I drove for a while that morning, the truck's engine humming steady under me as I left the city behind. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the kind of guy who runs from problems. I usually face them head-on, quiet but firm. But after Harper's mom called, blaming me for her looking bad, and after seeing Harper standing there in the kitchen, all teary and small, I needed air. I didn't know where I was going, just followed the highway, the trees blurring past, the sky gray and heavy like it might rain. The night before still sat in my chest, tight and sharp, Damon's words at the dinner tearing through everything Harper had tried to keep neat. She'd come home, try to talk, but I'd shut her out, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't know what to say. Now, with the road stretching out, I could think. I could feel the pieces settling, figuring out what I wanted next. I got back to the apartment that weekend, Saturday, late afternoon, the light fading fast. Harper was there, waiting. I'd spent the last couple days driving, sleeping in the truck one night, grabbing coffee at gas stations, just letting the distance clear my head. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up, a mug in her hands. She didn't look mad or sad, just tired, like the fight had drained out of her. The keys clinked as she set them on the counter, slow and careful, like she was afraid to break something. Hey, she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Can we talk? I stopped in the doorway, my jacket still on, my hands in my pockets. I didn't want to talk. Not yet, but I nodded anyway, because part of me knew we had to. I sat in the armchair across from her, not the couch, keeping that space between us. She took a breath, her fingers tightening around the mug. I never meant to lie, she said. Not really. I was scared. Scared of what? I asked, my voice low, steady. She looked down at the mug, her hair falling over her face. That you wouldn't fit, she said. My family, they're all about appearances. Claire's got her big dreams, my mom's got her perfect house, my dad's got his stories. And you're quiet. You don't show off. I thought they'd look at you and see less. I didn't want that for you. I stared at her, the words sinking in slow. She wasn't lying, not now, anyway. I could see it in her eyes, the way they flickered with something real. But it didn't make it better. You never asked if I cared, I said, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees. You decided I didn't fit. You didn't give me a chance to stand there and be me. You just hid me instead. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I know, she said. I see that now. I was wrong. I sat back, my hands resting on the arms of the chair, and let that sit there. She was wrong. Yeah, she was. But it wasn't just about the dinner, or the lie about the accident, or even Damon calling me out. It was about years of her looking past me, seeing what she wanted instead of what was there. I'd let her do it, stayed quiet, paid the bills, kept my head down, because I thought that's what she needed. But she didn't need me. She needed the version of me she'd made up, the one she could tuck away when it wasn't convenient. What do I do now? She asked, her voice breaking the silence. She looked up at me, her eyes wet, searching. I didn't have an easy answer. I didn't know if I had any answer. You learn to live without me, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Her face crumpled, but I didn't take it back. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door behind me. The room was dark, the blinds still closed from the morning, and I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped between my knees. I didn't mean it like we were done. Not yet, not for sure, but I meant it like something had to change. I couldn't keep being the guy she leaned on only when it suited her. I'd spent too long making myself small, fitting into her life instead of living mine. Out there on the road, I'd felt it, the space, the freedom, the chance to be more than her quiet husband. I didn't hate her. I didn't even want to leave her, not right then. But I needed her to see me, really see me, and I didn't know if she could. The door stayed shut, and she didn't knock. I heard her moving around out there, soft steps, the clink of her mug in the sink, and then it went quiet. Maybe she was thinking too, figuring out what she wanted. Maybe she was just waiting for me to come back out and fix it. But I wasn't ready to fix anything. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows shifting as the last of the daylight slipped away. Her words kept playing in my head. I was scared you wouldn't fit. It wasn't about me fitting with her family, it was about her fitting with them. She'd built her life around their approval, their polished picture, and I was the piece that didn't match. I tried to match, though, paid for their lake house, helped Claire, stayed out of the way. I'd done it all without asking for anything back, because I thought that's what love looked like. But love doesn't hide you. Love doesn't lie about you. Love doesn't wait until someone else says you're worth it to stand by you. Harper hadn't done that. She'd waited until Damon's voice cut through the noise, until the truth forced her to look at me. I rolled onto my side, the pillow cool against my face, and closed my eyes. The visit was too late, not because I didn't want to hear her, but because it didn't change what she'd done. She could say she was sorry, could cry and promise to try harder, but it didn't erase the years I'd spent invisible to her. I didn't know what we'd do tomorrow or the day after. I didn't know if we'd talk again, or if I'd pack a bag and go. But I knew I wasn't going back to the way it was. I'd given her too much already, my time, my money, my quiet, and I was done. The door stayed shut, the apartment stayed silent, and I let myself rest, just for a little while, in the space I'd finally claimed for myself. I woke up Sunday morning with the bedroom still dark, the blinds blocking out the world beyond the window. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the guy who chases big moments. I've always been fine with the small ones, the steady ones. But after shutting the door on Harper last night, after telling her she'd have to learn to live without me, I felt something new. Not loud or flashy, just solid, like I'd finally put my feet down on ground that was mine. She hadn't knocked, hadn't pushed, and when I got up, the apartment was quiet. No sign of her on the couch, no note, just her mug in the sink from the night before. Maybe she'd gone to her mom's, or Claire's, or just out to think. I didn't know, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to figure it out. I made coffee, the same black brew I always do, and sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam curl up in front of me. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was mine. That Monday, I went to work, not the warehouse, but the Corvia office downtown. I'd been dodging it for too long, showing up in my janitor gear to test systems, keeping my head down even there. But that morning, I put on a clean shirt, a jacket that didn't smell like cleaner, and walked into the building like I belonged. Because I did. I built this place with Mark, my partner, from a couple laptops and a basement to a glass-walled office with a team of 50. People nodded at me as I passed, some saying, "Morning, Julian," others just watching, curious maybe, because I didn't usually come in like this. I didn't hide anymore. At the meeting that day, I sat at the head of the table, not off to the side like I used to. Mark raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. He knew me well enough to let it be. When someone called me co-founder, I didn't brush it off with a laugh or a shrug. I nodded and said, "Yeah, that's me." It felt good, simple, but good. After work, I didn't go back to the apartment. Not right away. I drove to a place I'd seen online, a new building a few miles out, all bright walls and hardwood floors, the kind of spot that didn't feel like it was hiding anything. I'd been thinking about it for a while, even before the dinner blew up, but I hadn't acted. Now I did. The realtor met me there, a guy named Tom with a firm handshake and a quick smile. "You looking for a fresh start?" he asked as we walked through the empty rooms. I didn't answer, just looked around, the big windows letting in light, the quiet corners, the space that didn't carry anyone else's weight. "Something like that," I said finally. By the end of the hour, I'd signed the papers. My own place. No lake house rent, no internet bills for Harper's parents, no loans for Claire, just mine. I didn't tell Harper. Didn't need to. This wasn't about her anymore. I moved in that week, bit by bit. A mattress first, then a table, a couple chairs. I didn't take much from the apartment, just my clothes, my laptop, a box of books I'd kept stacked in the closet. Harper wasn't there when I packed. She'd been gone since Sunday, leaving a note that said, "Staying with Mom for a few days." I didn't call her, didn't text. I just kept going, setting up the new place with the kind of quiet focus I'd always had. The first morning I woke up there, the sun came through the windows, hitting the hardwood in warm stripes, and I made coffee in a kitchen that didn't have her mug in the sink. It was simple, bare walls, a single chair at the table, but it was enough. More than enough. I sat there, the mug hot in my hands, and felt the difference. No one was asking me to shrink, to pay, to stay out of sight. I could breathe here. Work got easier too. I stopped taking the janitor shifts, not because I didn't like them, but because I didn't need them anymore. I'd started them to keep my hands in the game, to see how our systems worked from the ground up, but now I could see it from the top. Damon came by my office that week, his face a little sheepish after his email. "Hey, boss," he said, leaning in the doorway. "You good?" I nodded, setting down a stack of papers. "Yeah, you." He shrugged. "Better now." Claire wasn't who I thought. I didn't push. He didn't need to explain. "You did me a favor," I said instead, and he grinned, quick and easy, before heading back to his desk. I meant it. He'd cracked open the lie without even trying, and now I was standing taller because of it. The day stretched into weeks, and I settled into the new place. I bought a couch, nothing fancy, just something to sit on, and a lamp that threw soft light across the room at night. I started cooking again, real food, not just pasta from a jar, steaks, potatoes, things I hadn't bothered with in a while. I'd sit at the table, the plate in front of me, and eat slow, tasting it, not rushing to clean up or move on. It was mine, my time, my space, my life. I didn't hear from Harper much, just a text now and then. "Can we talk soon?" I didn't answer. Not because I was mad, but because I wasn't ready. I was still figuring out who I was without her shadow over me, without her family's weight pulling me down. One night, I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights blinking in the distance. I thought about the old me, the guy who'd nod and smile, who'd pay the bills and stay quiet, who'd let Harper decide what I was worth. He was gone. Not dead, just left behind. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone now, not to her, not to her mom, not to Claire. I'd spent years shrinking myself, thinking that's what made me strong, but it didn't. Letting go did. Taking this apartment, walking into work like I owned it, because I did, that's what made me strong. I turned away from the window, the room quiet around me, and felt it. Self-worth, real and steady, not tied to anyone else's eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't waiting. I was just me, and that was enough. I was sitting at my new table one evening, a plate of chicken and rice in front of me, when the mail came. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the guy who lingers on the past. I'd rather keep moving, keep building. But that night, a few weeks after I'd settled into my own place, something pulled me back. The envelope was plain, white, with my name scratched out in Claire's messy handwriting. I hadn't heard from her since the dinner, since Damon ended things and the whole mess with Harper's family unraveled. I set my fork down, wiped my hands on a napkin, and opened it, the paper crinkling under my fingers. It was a letter, handwritten, 2 pages, the ink smudged in spots like she'd taken her time with it. I leaned back in the chair, the lamp casting a soft glow over the words, and started reading. "Julian," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this, but I hope you do. I owe you an apology more than that, really, but it's a start. I've been thinking about that night, about what happened at my birthday dinner, and I can't stop feeling like I messed up. Not just because of Damon, though that's part of it, but because of you. Harper always talked about you like, I don't know, like you were this quiet guy who didn't care about much. Humble husband, she'd say, and I'd laugh, thinking it was cute or something. I didn't know who you really were. I didn't ask. And when Damon said you were his boss, that you're some big deal at Corvaya, I didn't believe it at first. It didn't fit the picture I had. But it wasn't my picture that was wrong, it was me. I judged you, and I'm sorry." I stopped there, the paper resting on the table, and took a sip of water from the glass beside me. Claire's words weren't a surprise, not exactly. I'd known how they saw me, how Harper had painted me for them. The humble husband bit stung, though, more than I expected. I could hear her saying it, her voice light and teasing, like it was a joke we were all in on. Except I wasn't laughing. I never had been. I kept reading, my eyes tracing the uneven lines. I lost Damon because of it, she wrote. He didn't like how I acted, how I didn't stick up for you when Harper made that accident excuse. He said he couldn't be with someone who cared more about what people think than who they are. He's right. I didn't see it then, but I do now. I looked at you and saw what Harper told me to see, not what was there. That's on me. The honesty in it hit me, not hard, not like a punch, but steady, like a hand on my shoulder. Claire wasn't wrong. She'd laughed at Harper's comments, nodded along when her mom brushed me off, taken the money I sent for her loans without a second thought. But she wasn't the only one. They all had, Harper's parents, her friends, everyone who'd smiled at me like I was a stray they'd let in the door. I'd let them, too, staying quiet, keeping my life at Corvia separate, thinking it didn't matter what they thought. But it did. Not because I needed their approval, but because it showed me what Harper had been doing all along, shaping me into something small, something safe, something she could control. I turned the page, the paper creasing under my thumb. I don't expect you to forgive me, she went on. I don't even know if you should. But I wanted you to know I see you now. Not the janitor, not the guy Harper talked about, but you, Julian. The guy who built something big, who didn't need to brag about it. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I wish I'd asked. Damon did. He talked about you all the time, how you're smart, how you care about the work. I didn't listen until it was too late. I'm not asking for anything back. Just wanted to say I'm sorry, and I hope you're okay. She signed it simply Claire, no flourish, no extra words, just her name in that same messy scrawl. I folded the letter neat and set it on the table, my food cold now, the rice sticking to the plate. I didn't feel angry reading it, not at her. Anyway, Claire was young, caught up in her family's world, and she'd bought the story Harper sold. I couldn't hate her for that. She'd lost something, Damon, and she'd owned up to why. That took guts, more than I'd expected from her. I got up, took the plate to the sink, and rinsed it slow, the water running over my hands. The letter stayed where it was, a quiet weight in the room, and I thought about what it meant. Not just her words, but the fact she'd written them. She didn't have to. She could have let it fade, let me stay the guy in the background of her life, but she didn't. She reached out, and that said something. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a box from the closet, one I hadn't unpacked yet, just odds and ends from the old place, and slid the letter inside. I didn't need to keep it out, didn't need to stare at it, but I wasn't throwing it away either. It was a piece of this, a marker of where I'd been and where I was going. I didn't hate Claire, not before, not now. I didn't need her sorry, didn't need her to see me, because I was seeing myself. That's what mattered. The janitor, the co-founder, the husband, they were all me, and I wasn't splitting them apart anymore. Harper had tried to pick one, the one that fit her story, and Claire had gone along with it. But that chapter was closed now, shut tight like the box I slid back into the closet. I stood there, the apartment quiet around me, the hardwood cool under my feet. Outside, the city hummed. Cars, lights, life moving on, and I felt steady in it. Claire's letter wasn't a weight to carry. It was a door I didn't need to open again. I'd spent too long waiting for people to see me. Harper, her family, even myself, and now I didn't have to. I walked back to the kitchen, poured a glass of whiskey, and sat by the window, the night stretching out beyond the glass. The past was there, in that box, in those words, but it wasn't mine to hold on to. I'd let it go, not with anger, not with regret, just with the calm of knowing I didn't need their validation anymore. I was enough, always had been, and that was the end of it. I was sitting in my new apartment one night, the lamp throwing a warm circle of light over the couch where I'd settled with a book. My name's Julian Marsh, and I'm not the guy who looks back much. I've always been about the next step, the next day. But that night, a few months after moving out, after Claire's letter and the quiet that followed, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Harper. One last message, short and simple, popping up on the screen like a ghost I thought I'd left behind. I still love you. I see it now. Can we try again? I stared at it, the words glowing in the dim room, my thumb resting on the edge of the phone. The book stayed open in my lap, the pages still, and I let the silence sit there with me, heavy but not uncomfortable. I didn't answer, didn't type anything back. I just set the phone down, face up, and watched it go dark. It wasn't the first time she'd reached out since I'd left. There'd been texts, "Can we talk?" or "I miss you," scattered over the weeks. each one a little shorter, a little less sure. I hadn't replied to those either. Not because I was angry. I wasn't, not anymore, but because I didn't know what to say. That night, though, this message felt different. Final, maybe. Like she was laying it all out, one last card on the table, hoping I'd pick it up. I didn't hate her for it. Part of me even believed her. She probably did see it now. After everything, after Damon's words at the dinner cracked her world open. But seeing it now wasn't enough. Not for me. I leaned back, the couch creaking under me, and thought about what she was asking. Trying again, rewinding to what we had, or maybe to something new. But some things you don't rewind, you can't. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water, the tap running steady and cold. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of traffic outside. I liked it that way, simple mine. I thought about the old place, the one I'd shared with her, with its cluttered counters and her mugs always in the sink. I thought about the years there, the way I'd come home from work, janitor shifts or Corvia meetings, didn't matter, and slip into the background of her life. She'd talk about her day, her family, her plans, and I'd listen, nodding, keeping it easy. I'd pay the bills, hers, her parents', Claire's, and never ask for anything back. I thought that's what made us work, me being steady, her being bright. But it didn't work. It just kept me small, and her blind, until the truth came out and she couldn't look away. I took the glass back to the couch, sat down, and picked up the phone again. The message was still there, waiting. I still love you. I didn't doubt she meant it in her way. Harper wasn't cruel. She wasn't out to hurt me. She just built a life where I didn't fit, not the real me, and when that fell apart, she didn't know what to do. I remembered her standing in the kitchen that weekend, tears in her eyes, saying she was scared I wouldn't match her family's picture. She tried to protect that picture, not me, and I'd let her because I didn't want the fight. But love that only shows up after the curtain's pulled back isn't love, it's convenience. She didn't love me when I was the janitor, the quiet guy she could hide. She loved me now because someone else said I was worth it. And that wasn't enough. I set the phone down again, this time face down, and closed the book. I didn't need to answer her, not tonight, maybe not ever. I'd spent too long waiting for her to see me, to stand by me, to choose me over the shiny world she wanted. And when she didn't, I'd chosen myself. This place, the bright walls, the hardwood floors, the mornings where I woke up to my own quiet, was proof of that. I didn't need her to try again, because I wasn't trying to fix what we'd had. I was done fixing things for her, done carrying her family's weight, done being the guy she could tuck away. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city, lights blinking, steady and alive. I felt steady too, rooted in a way I hadn't been before. I thought about the past, those years of nodding along, of letting her decide what I was. The lake house payments, the internet bills, Claire's loans, all gone now, canceled with a few taps on my phone, and I didn't miss them. I didn't miss the dinners I wasn't invited to, the way her mom's voice would tighten when she said my name, the way Claire would smile without really looking at me. I didn't miss Harper's excuses, her half-truths, the way she'd kiss my cheek and leave me behind. I'd given them everything I had: time, money, silence, and they'd taken it without giving anything back. Now I was taking it back, piece by piece, building something new. Not out of spite, not to prove a point, just for me. The phone stayed silent, no more buzzes, no more pleas. I walked to the bedroom, turned off the lamp, and lay down, the sheets cool against my skin. My name's Julian Marsh. I'm not a janitor, not just that, anyway. I'm not a disappointment, not someone to hide. I'm the guy who built Corvia Systems, who walks into work and owns it, who lives in a place that feels like his own. I'm not perfect. I've got my flaws, my quiet days, my doubts, but I'm seen now, by me if no one else. That's what matters. Harper's message didn't change that. Her love, coming late like this, didn't pull me back. I didn't need it to. I'd found my peace, my worth, and it wasn't tied to her anymore. I closed my eyes, the city's hum fading into the background, and let it go. Not with anger, not with a fight, just with the calm of knowing I was done. She could love me, she could see me, she could want me back, but it wouldn't rewind what I'd learned. I wasn't going back to being her rock, her shadow, her secret. I was moving forward, one step at a time, into a life I'd made for myself. And as I drifted off, the weight of her words slipped away, light as air, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own breathing, steady, free, mine.